Hey everybody, CS160 students, welcome. In this video here, we're going to do some example Python input and output. I have idle open here. Now remember that idle is the tool that I'm recommending for use in this class here. We'll do some examples here. And when I bring up the shell, remember I can either create a file from scratch or I can open a previous one. So if I go to open and I bring up test, which is a program that I used in a previous time. I don't think I showed this in the last video. Actually, I showed a different program, but this is a very basic program. One good thing about bringing up the a previous one is you can start from there, right? So now that I can do a save as, and I can save it as test, test 2 or assignment 2 or whatever you want to call it. And if I need to overwrite something, I can overwrite something. So now I have my new program. I would not recommend that you just use the same file throughout the class, because if you overwrite your old code, and let's say in week 6 you want to go back and look at what you wrote in week 3, you can find it because you can go onto the D to L shell and download it. But I think it's good if you build your library of your programs and you keep them in a directory. Okay, so we're going to do some example input output here. So example, print a single string. A string is defined as one or more characters inside double quotes. In double quotes, whatever's in between those double quotes gets printed exactly as it's shown, right? So I can have another example where I print multiple strings. And you do that by putting commas in between the two strings in this case. So let's run this and see what happens. Remember, I hit F5 to run, and then I click OK. And you can see here, in the first case, it printed it out exactly. In the second case, it printed out the first string and the second string followed with a space in between, right? So I can take that to another example, do something like that. And I get my A, B, C, D. You'll learn in the next one, it might be in some of this week's material or it might be coming up, how to basically get rid of the space in between these if you don't want the space. All right, now let's talk a little bit about data types. Integer data type. Now notice that I don't have double quotes around these. That's when if I want to print the values, right? And you can see the difference. But if I do something like that, where I print A in double quotes and I print A without double quotes, you can see that if there's double quotes, it gets printed out exactly. If there's no double quote, it gets evaluated to whatever that value is. Now what happens if I try to print something that I haven't defined? Let's see what happens there. I get an error. And in Python, you'll see this thing called traceback. Traceback will almost always indicate that you have an error, and it will tell you where it is, and it says in this case, X is not defined. So I could fix that by creating a value for it. And there we go, okay? So if I want to get input from the user, I use this input command. And what I can always do is I can always provide what's called a prompt, right? In other words, when I run this, it is waiting here for me to enter a number. And so let's say that I enter 45.22. So I enter my number and my program ends. If I go in my interpreter and I print out the value, there's my number there, right? Now what if I meant for it to be an integer? So in this example, if I do a real number, I get my real number here. If I want to turn a value into an integer, I could do something like this. I can do f1 equals 99.345, f2 equals 99.777, I1 equals int of f1, and I2 equals int of f2. Print I1, I2. Let's see what happens here. Okay, so if you look here, I printed out 99 in both of these cases. And you might have been confused by that. You'll say, hold on a second. 99.3, that makes sense that I round that down. But 99.777, should I round that up or down? In computer science generally, in programming languages generally, whenever you take the int value of a non-integer, it will almost always truncate or round down, right? In fact, let me make it even more obvious. See, in this case, even 99.99999 was rounded down. So I'm going to show you a trick, right? In order to turn int x from truncating x to rounding x, we do this instead. f3 equals 99. We're going to do a few examples here. We're going to do I3 equals int of f3 plus 0.5. So what I did here was I added a half. I added 0.5 to my number. And you can see if I use these three examples, basically what that does is you add 0.5 to a number. If the number is more than halfway toward the next number, it gets enough added to it that truncating it brings it down to that next number. So here's how you do rounding up or down versus just truncating. Okay. Now, how about if I want to do input, right? If I want to input a number as an integer, maybe we'll say y equals input, enter an integer. What I do is I just put int around that whole thing. Oops, what did I do wrong? Oh, I'm missing a double quote. Okay. I don't know if you caught what just happened there, right? I had a missing double quote there. There's a clue there because my colors are messed up here. But as soon as I hit return, look what happened. I didn't get, my cursor wasn't all the way to the left side. Indentation matters in Python. You're going to learn this very soon as we start to indent our code. And the fact that that was a clue for me because something was wrong. Now, let's say that I delete that quote right now and I go ahead and I run. I get an error message. I get invalid syntax, and you can see that the line is highlighted here. And so I can fix that. Now here it's asking me to enter an integer. So if I enter an integer, it works fine. Let's try to enter a non-integer and let's see what happens. It failed, right? So in other words, even though these commands modified non-integers to integers, the fact that I put it int around the input statement actually caught an error there, which might seem non-intuitive to you, but it's important to know. And so in a 1, 2, 3 weeks, I forget exactly when, I will show you how to do error checking here so that if you're forcing the user to enter an integer and they're not being cooperative, your program can handle that. Okay. Let's see, anything else we want to show here? I think this is pretty straightforward here. Oh, there is one other thing I should show you. All right. If I do some basic math, let me show some other examples. Print 10 plus 3. Print 12 divided by 4. Print 3 times 10. Let's run that and see what happens. You can see here, 10 plus 3 is 13, 12 divided by 4 is 3.0, and 3 times 10 is 30. Let me add a couple more divides here. Let me do 12 divided by 5. Let's see what that does. Oops, sorry. Let me run that again. 2.4. So Python was smart enough in this case to use the divide to do real number division, right? In other words, turn an integer into a decimal. Some programming languages will not do that, by the way. And so you have to be careful and make sure that you're that your math is not truncating by accident. So just a good thing to be aware of. If I do something like A1 equals int of 3.4 and A2 equals int of 4.2, and I do, let's do it this way. And then I do print A1 divided by A2. Let's see what that does. It did work, right? It truncated 8.4 down to 8 and 4.2 down to 4, and it divided 8 by 4 to give me 2.0. Okay, so the good news is you can always try stuff, right? And I recommend that you try stuff. All this stuff that we just tried, we could have just typed it in here as well. But the reason I did it in here is so that I can give you the program and you can fiddle with it. All right, for assignment 2, you're going to do some more of this input and output things, and you're going to do some of the same kind of stuff. The biggest piece of advice I give you, if it's not feeling comfortable, just keep trying it. And you can't damage anything, right? You're doing stuff like this, all you're going to do is create error messages in this screen. You're not going to create real damage here. So that's what's good about programming, is you can try things, and it's very, very, very safe. So I will save this. I will provide this file with the video, and let me know what you think.